I looked at the stack of Excel worksheets that just populated my inbox on the company SharePoint site and realized I would be working until at least 6:30 p.m. It happens every month. Managers would wait until almost the last minute before sending their reports, and it was left to me to collate the data. So much for getting home at a decent hour. So I called my wife, Samantha, to explain the situation and let her know I would be working late again. "End of the month blues again, Mike?" my wife asked. "That's me, by the way, Mike Jacobs." I could hear the snarkiness in Samantha's question. "Yeah, happens every damn month. Some of these people wait till the very last second to send this stuff, almost as if they expect something great to fall in their lap." "I am sorry. I should be done about 6:30, as usual." "No problem. I figured it would happen," Samantha told me with a sigh. "Anyway, I reserved a table for 2 at Luigi's for 7 p.m. tonight. I thought you could use the break." Luigi's was a small but comfortable Italian restaurant we both enjoyed. It sat next to an equally small dance club, and we often enjoyed a drink and a few slow dances before returning home to finish the evening in bed. I smiled at the thought of a nice evening with my lovely wife. "Yes, I could," I responded. "That was very thoughtful of you, sweetheart. So, 7-ish then?" "7-ish it is," Samantha confirmed. "Ta-ta for now," she added before ending the call. I thought it odd that she didn't finish the conversation with her usual loving endearment. Then I realized her boss, Wilson Langley, the senior partner of the Hempstead Law Group, was probably within earshot. I looked at the handset for a second before placing it back on the phone, then went to work. I saved the spreadsheets, opened my master sheet, and started the macro that would do the lion's share of the work. It used to take hours to pour through all the data, but the macro that our IT guys put together did an excellent job of collating and sorting everything out, and it took only a fraction of the time to finish. Freshening my coffee, I sat back and thought about the last few years and my life with Samantha as the macro chugged away. I wasn't always an office worker. In fact, until about 7 years ago, I was a federal agent working for a somewhat special task force, a joint public-private venture. I was one of the first agents assigned to the task force and reported directly to the man at the top of the food chain, a family law attorney named Bill Jackson. I worked with some of the best in the business. Frank Michaels, for one. Oscar Warren was another. Unfortunately, Frank was killed in the line of duty. Oscar married the boss daughter and is working up the ladder. The agency I worked for, officially dubbed the Homefront Security Task Force, was created for one primary purpose: to go after something called the Mutual Marital Assurance Society, or MMAS. The organization was founded by a female lawyer whose husband cheated on her. She was later shafted by the court system, so she set out to exact revenge. At first, MMAS targeted cheating husbands, punishing them in horrific ways. They proved to be an elusive bunch, and we spent most of our time in those days reacting to protect the husbands whose wives set them up for punishment. We called those interventions, and we were usually successful. Remember that when I speak of punishment, it is usually quite brutal. More than one unsuspecting husband died from the harsh treatment doled out. Many more became scarred for life, both physically and emotionally. The hospital at Fort Apache, the base where the task force was headquartered, was full of men suffering from punishment meted out by MMAS operatives. My time on the task force made me more than a bit jaded regarding relationships. After seeing what so many men had suffered at the hands of their spouses, I shied away from anything that resembled a committed relationship. So I went from intervention to intervention, doing my best for the men I was assigned to help. My life changed drastically, thanks to a bullet that smashed my right femur a few inches above the knee during one of those interventions. After months of surgeries and physical therapy, I was finally able to walk with the assistance of a cane. But my career as a federal agent was finished. Being the kind of man he is, Bill told me to my face that my time with the task force was over, and there were no available slots that I could fill. I got a medal, the thanks of a grateful nation, and a monthly disability check. Bill thought that wasn't enough, so he spoke to his contacts and got me a job as an assistant operations director with Iverson Security Services, or ISS. ISS is a nationwide company that provides uniformed on-site security, private investigative services, and armed security for well-heeled VIPs with more dollars than cents. One of the company's clients just happens to be the task force I once served. Better yet, the headquarters where I would work just happened to be in my hometown, where I own a 2-story house bequeathed to me by my grandparents. Relieved that I wouldn't have to move or sell the place, I happily accepted after a short interview with Jack Iverson, the president and founder of the company. My job was simple compared to what I used to do. Basically, I pushed paper from one pile to another. I made face-to-face visits with clients to iron out any issues or do whatever it was that Greg Hamilton, the COO at the time, needed to be done. That's when I first met Samantha Green. At the time, she was an office assistant with Hempstead. She was tasked with finding someone to provide security for the firm's downtown headquarters building. When negotiations between our marketing people and Langley started to bog down, Greg sent me in to wrap things up. It was my job to either get the contract signed or end the nonstop back and forth. Wilson Langley seemed impressed that ISS would send someone with my credentials to clarify things. I knew the game he was playing. He wanted more services for less money, like any savvy businessman. To that end, he spent weeks stringing our marketing people along, making minor changes to each offered contract. I explained our standard operating procedures and informed him that we were happy to adjust to his firm's needs. Still, our initial contract was the same one we employed for all our customers. In the event that he had special needs or requirements, he could always contact my department to make the necessary adjustments, providing they were legal and reasonable. In other words, fish or cut bait. Is that right, Mr. Jacobs? He asked, laughing. I shrugged my shoulders before responding. I suppose that's one way of looking at it, Mr. Langley, I responded. I appreciate your candor. Very well. You have my business, the older man stated, extending a hand. Have your people send me the best contract you can put together, and I'll sign it. Thank you, Mr. Langley. I told him as we shook hands. We put the contract together, and true to his word, Wilson Langley signed. Afterward, he promoted Samantha and made her his executive assistant. I was more than a little surprised when Samantha called me later that week to inform me of her promotion. I asked her out for dinner to celebrate, and she accepted, beginning our relationship. I wasn't expecting anything to come of it, and I was surprised to learn that she wasn't put off by my disability. A year later, Greg retired, and Old Man Iverson promoted me into the COO slot. I knew that Greg had been grooming me for the job, but was surprised to see the transition happen so fast. It didn't take long for me to adapt to my new position, and I knew the extra money would come in handy. That's when I decided to open a new bank account for my disability since I no longer needed to rely on it for monthly expenses. My plan was to save it for my eventual retirement. For some reason, I never mentioned that account to Sam. We celebrated my promotion with dinner at Luigi's Friday, where I proposed marriage. After Samantha accepted my proposal, she took me to meet her parents. I already knew her father was Jacob Green, one of the wealthiest men in the state, but I had never met the man in person. He turned out to also be one of the most condescending a-holes I had ever met. He glared at the walking stick in my left hand with a frown before extending his hand. I almost felt the disdain emanating from his body as we shook hands. So, Sam tells me you were a federal agent, shot in the line of duty, he snarled after lighting a large cigar. That's correct, I confirmed in a neutral tone. Who did you work for? The Home Front Security Task Force, I answered. I saw one eyebrow go up. Never heard of him, Jacob growled. What did you do for them? Scrub the shitters? His sneering arrogance was really pissing me off, but I knew that's what he was hoping for. Sam had warned me that he could be crass and salty, so I decided to cram it back down his throat without letting him know he had gotten to me. I'm not allowed to talk about everything I did, but I can tell you this. I killed them, I answered calmly. His eyebrows instantly went up as his eyes widened. I smiled, then continued. At least the ones I didn't toss into jail. He recovered before continuing. Looks like you missed one, though, didn't you? He queried while pointing at my right leg. I chuckled. He got me in the leg all right, but he didn't survive the encounter. Blew his head clean off. They never did find his entire skull, I responded with a smile. You see, I hate to lose an argument. The old man looked startled for a moment, then his face softened and morphed into a wide grin. Then he laughed out loud. You had me going there, Mike. Kinda reminded me of myself at your age. Welcome to the family, son, he added as he extended his hand. You know, I'm still gonna insist that you sign a prenup if you want to marry my daughter. No offense, but I want to make sure you're not just sniffing after her trust fund. No offense taken, Mr. Green, I told him as we shook hands. And I have no problem with a prenup, so long as it's reasonable and equitable. Good, but no more of this, Mr. Green crap, you hear me? You marry my little girl. You call me Pop if you want. All right, Pop. He laughed and called Sam into the parlor. Is everything all right? Samantha asked when she came into the room. I think so, her father answered. You picked a good man here. Someone with a backbone and a set of balls to match. A lot better than that last piece of crap you married. Sam had already told me about her first husband, a man she met in college. She didn't tell me the whole story but admitted they were divorced. I certainly think so, Sam said as she walked to her father. So, are you two okay, then? Yeah, we're just fine, aren't we, Mike? Absolutely, Pop. The old man smiled as he looked up at his daughter. See? Now, why don't you go help your mother with dinner? We'll be right along. Okay, Dad, she responded, giving him a kiss on the cheek. After she left the room, he looked at me. Tell me something, Mike. Seriously, did you really mean what you said about killing people? Of course, I told him, causing the blood to drain from his face. But they were all bad guys and really deserved it. Maybe you can tell me about it one of these days, Jacob said. I'd love to, Pop, but it's all classified, and I signed a non-disclosure agreement. He regarded me for a bit before slowly nodding his head. I can respect that, son, he finally said. The rest of our visit went quite well after that. When Sam and I left, her parents and I had warmed up to each other. I guess the old guy needed to know he could respect his future son-in-law. The wedding, which was held in a large old church, was well attended. We flew to Hawaii for our honeymoon on Jacob's dime, and Sam moved into my house when we returned, selling her condo. Life went well for us, at least until a few months ago. My computer dinged, bringing me back to reality. I saw a dialog box telling me the macro had completed its job. I looked over the final product, spot-checked the numbers to ensure it was accurate, then saved and printed the package after completing my executive summary. I put the report in a binder, closed everything down, and placed it on Jack's desk so he would see it first thing in the morning. If it had been anyone else, I would have just emailed it. But my boss is what one could call old school and preferred an actual printout he could hold in his hands, and I can't blame him for that. After washing up and combing my hair, I donned my suit jacket, grabbed my walking cane, and looked around before turning off the lights. Glancing at my watch, I saw it was 6:32 p.m. and knew I had plenty of time to buy some flowers for Sam on the way to Luigi's. I got in my car and turned on the sound system, letting the strains of Thick as a Brick wash over me. Okay, so I like classic Jethro Tull, Sue Me, or Sue My Father, if you insist. He's the one who got me hooked on Tull as a kid. In fact, he took me to the first concert I ever attended. Naturally, it was a Tull concert. We had a great time, and I still remember all the other kids saying it was so cool that I had a father who liked rock music, and I didn't argue the point since they were right. Even now, Dad and I frequently enjoy a cigar while listening to some old Tull songs. I got to the restaurant and saw it was 6:55 p.m., so I texted Sam to tell her I was there. She had said 7-ish, which, in Samantha speak, meant anywhere between 6:55 and 7:15, and I didn't see her car in the parking lot. K was all the response I got. No emojis, no terms of endearment. Ordinarily, this wouldn't bother me, but it did tonight. For the last several weeks, Samantha had been somewhat cold and moody. I asked her repeatedly what was bothering her, but she would just dismiss me with a wave of her hand and an offhand comment. I hoped the flowers I bought would put her in a better frame of mind. Sighing, I got out of the car, flowers in hand, and went into the restaurant. The woman at the door smiled when I entered, and her smile widened when she saw the flowers in my hand. Jacob's party of two, I announced. Right this way, sir, the young woman replied as she grabbed 2 menus. I followed her to a table by the back wall and sat so I could see the restaurant's interior, partly out of habit. She handed me a menu and poured a glass of water before leaving. I sipped my water as I read over the menu. I already knew what I wanted and was simply killing time as I waited for my wife to show up. The next 20 minutes seemed to go by agonizingly slow. I saw it was 7:20 and looked up to see if Sam had shown up, but she hadn't. Then I saw him walk in my direction. I could tell from his dress and manner that he was a process server. I had seen many of his type over the years. I also noticed the manila envelope in his hand, which was a dead giveaway. I hoped he would bypass me, but knew in my gut he wouldn't. Michael Jacobs? The man asked when he reached my table. Yes, I replied. May I please see some identification? Of course, I told him as I pulled out my wallet and showed him my driver's license. He handed me the envelope and took a picture with his phone. You've been served, sir, he intoned. Have a good evening. With that, he turned and walked away. I watched him leave and open the envelope. I already knew what was in it and wasn't surprised when I saw the paperwork marked Petition for Dissolution of Marriage. I hadn't done anything to warrant this, but it fit the attitude Samantha had been displaying over the last few weeks. She was divorcing me, claiming adultery, which was a flat-out lie. Pulling my phone from my pocket, I sent Sam a text, WTF? Then I heard a woman's voice as I read Samantha's petition. Mr. Jacobs? I saw a reasonably petite blonde in a business suit standing at the table. Turning on the phone's video record app, I placed it back in my pocket so the camera lens would capture the conversation, which I suspected would not be very comfortable. That depends, I responded. Who might you be? The woman held out a hand. Allison Cartwright, Hempstead Law Group. I started reaching for her hand, but stopped after her following statement. I'm representing your wife. I put my hand back down, embarrassed, and looked at the paperwork in front of me. May I sit down, please? It's a free country. Help yourself. She pulled out a chair and sat, facing me. A waitress came by, apparently thinking the woman across from me was part of my party of two. Are you two ready to order? The waitress, whose name tag read Cindy, asked, holding a pen and a pad. No, I won't be staying much longer, I told Cindy. Allison turned away, and Cindy simply nodded her head, not expecting my response. Very well, sir, Cindy said. Let me know if you change your mind. I waited until she was gone before looking at Allison. My client requested I collect the papers after you sign them, Allison said, continuing her statement. So, your client, my soon-to-be ex-wife, requested you collect the papers I just received, expecting me to sign them without reading them or consulting an attorney of my own. Have I got that right? Yes. Something like that, Allison answered quietly. Well, you can tell your client she can eat my shit and die, I hissed. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'll be going home. You'll hear from my attorney soon. Mr. Jacobs, that won't be possible, Allison said. First off, my client has taken out a restraining order against you, and you aren't allowed to come within 500 feet of the marital home. Really? And I suppose she wants the house as well? Yes, actually, she does, and I feel she's entitled to it. Did your client tell you that house is in my name only, and has been ever since it was bequeathed to me by my grandparents? Long before we were married, which means it's not community property. No, she didn't, Allison said. But you feel she's entitled to it anyway? After what you've done, yes, Allison said, pulling an envelope out of her purse. She tossed it on the table, and I looked inside to see a stack of photos. I wasn't surprised to note they were pictures of two people having sex. I already knew I wasn't one of the people in the images, and I suspected she also knew. Allison wasn't finished, however. You see, Mr. Jacobs, we have photographic evidence of your infidelity, she said. We also have video. My client has asked me to inform you that if you don't sign those papers, she will see to it those photos and the videos they came from get delivered to everyone you know. Your boss, as well as your family and friends. That's extortion, I told her. A felony in this state. And the fact that you're a participant in that act makes you an accessory in Samantha's crime. Allison smirked as she shrugged her shoulders. Extortion, that's just another name for family law. Trust me, Mr. Jacobs, there's a lot more we can do to you, she quipped. Seeing the look on my face, Allison softened her tone. My client isn't completely unreasonable, however. She is willing to let you come to the house long enough to get what you need for a few days. I've been asked to accompany you. Well, isn't that just magnanimous of her? I quipped sarcastically. Allison recoiled at my words and my tone but said nothing. I decided to play it cool for the time being, grabbed the packet of photos and the divorce paperwork, and stood up. Follow me if you must. I hadn't ordered anything, so I left the flowers and $20 for the waitress for her trouble and angrily strode out of the restaurant as fast as my cane would allow. Even so, Allison had difficulty keeping up. I got into my car, ended the video app, and sped out of the parking lot, not caring if Allison was behind me. I got to the house and parked in front of the garage. I opened the garage door and saw the empty space where Samantha usually parked. I took a deep breath and looked at the house. Then I remembered my time on the task force. I recalled the numerous times unsuspecting husbands were ambushed in their own homes by MMAS operatives, who drugged, then abused, and tortured the men. Is that what you have in store for me, Sam? I asked no one in particular. Well, guess what? Ain't happening today. I unlocked my glove box, pulled out the holstered 9mm semi-automatic pistol I kept there, made sure a round was in the chamber and attached it to my belt. As Allison parked by the curb, I got out of the car and went to the front door. I unlocked the door but didn't open it completely. Putting the keys back in my pocket, I drew the pistol out of its holster. Allison's face went white at the sight of my firearm. It's all right, I have a concealed carry permit, I told her. And I know how to use this. That's not necessary, Mr. Jacobs, Allison stammered, her eyes on the pistol. I'll be the judge of what's necessary or not. Ladies first. Keep your hands where I can see them at all times, and don't even think of reaching for anything. Give me cause, and I'll drop you so fast you'll be dead before you know it. Understand? Yeah, I understand, she said. I motioned for her to enter first with the gun. Good. Go on. Open the door. I'll be right behind you. Allison eyed the pistol as she crept up the stairs to the front door. Open it, I commanded. She nervously opened the door and went inside the house. I followed behind, pistol in my right hand, while using my cane to support myself with my left. My training kicked in as I quickly turned off the security alarm and looked around to ensure no one was inside. I motioned for Allison to stand in the center of the room. "Toss your purse on the couch," I ordered. After Allison obeyed, I instructed her to put her hands on her head and stay put, and I nodded when she complied. "And remember what I said. Follow my orders to the letter, and you'll walk out of here in one piece." I slowly walked around the ground floor and ensured no one else was there. I opened the door to the basement and turned on the light. I looked around and saw no one there, so I went back into the front room where Allison was standing. "Upstairs. Now," I ordered. Allison started for her purse, but I stopped her. "Leave it." She obeyed and headed for the stairs. After she got up a couple steps, I sat down in the stair lift, something I had installed after my discharge. Allison looked at me as we slowly made our way to the second floor. "What are you looking for anyway?" she asked. "Just making sure you and Samantha didn't leave any nasty surprises for me." "You think we would do something like that?" Allison asked. "Been known to happen before," I told her. "After your threat at the restaurant, I'm just being careful." We got to the top of the stairs, and I got back on my feet. "Stay here. Don't move," I said before checking the rooms on the second floor. Once I was certain no one else was in the house, I directed Allison into the master bedroom and holstered my pistol. "What's this?" I asked, seeing a clothing bag and an overnight bag on the bed. "Samantha took the liberty of putting some of your things together to speed things up." I looked through both bags, not sure what to expect anymore. Satisfied that nothing had been sabotaged and no bugs were placed in my things, I went into the closet and pulled a few more items out. Then I pushed several hanging items to one side, revealing my built-in fireproof safe. I opened the outer door, ensuring Allison couldn't see what I was doing, and placed my hand on the black plate underneath. The scanner verified my fingerprints, and the inner door was unlatched. I saw the strap of $100 bills and pulled it out. I figured the $10,000 in the strap would be enough to hold me over for a bit. While there, I grabbed some critical papers and flipped a switch in the back of the safe, activating the whole house surveillance system. From this time forward, everything that happened in the house would be recorded and saved to a cloud server. Every motion, every word, and both sides of every phone call on the landline. I could watch and listen anytime I wanted, and if I chose, I could monitor everything in real time. This was a system I had installed while in the task force, and I hadn't used it since before my wedding. Even though the technology had been updated since the system was first installed, I knew it would work and would capture whatever evidence I needed. I closed and locked the safe, then returned to the bedroom where Allison was waiting for me. I put everything in the overnight bag. Then I pulled my wedding ring off and tossed it on the dresser. "Are you ready now?" Allison asked. "Yeah," I told her. "Good. I'll carry your clothing bag down if you want. I know you need your left hand." "Thank you," I said coldly. We walked downstairs, and I went into my home office. "I need to take care of a few things before I go." "Wait here," I told her. I went into my office, my inner sanctum. Samantha rarely ever came into this room as she had her own office. But I wasn't about to take any chances. I changed the primary boot-up password on my computer just in case Samantha tried to access it. Then I disconnected the external backup drive and set it aside to take with me. I flipped a switch in the closet that activated my emergency file destruction system. Like the video surveillance system, it had been installed while I was in the task force but had remained off for the last 7 years. If anyone broke in and tried to take any of my files, they would find only ashes by the time the incendiary devices finished their job. I changed the security code on the door to the office and double-locked it, something I hadn't done in years. Taking one last look around, I closed the door and went back into the front room, where Allison was waiting for me. "Ready now?" she asked. "Let's go," I said flatly. I locked the front door and reset the alarm system before closing it. Allison turned to me after putting the clothing bag in the trunk of my car. "Just so you know, your joint account has been frozen. Samantha has already taken out her share. Don't wait too long to sign the papers. I hope to hear from your lawyer soon," she said. "Trust me, I don't know what the hell kind of game you and Samantha are playing, but I promise you this. I will get to the bottom of it, and I promise you heads will roll. Just so you know, you and your client have declared war," I hissed. Allison's face turned white as she took in my words. "You're now my enemies. You drew first blood, and I don't like to lose an argument." I headed downtown, where I knew of a hotel where I could get an extended stay room at a reasonable rate even without a reservation. ISS had used this hotel many times over the years, so much so that they gave us a nice discount. I paid for a week's stay in cash, figuring I would be back in my own house by then. I also didn't want to make it any easier for them to find me, even though I figured they were having me followed. The clerk was surprised to see me hand over a small pile of $100 bills, but he said nothing as he put them in his cash register and handed me a key card. A bellhop took my luggage and followed me to the room on the 11th floor. After putting everything away, I ordered dinner from the hotel's kitchen, which I knew was open until midnight. Then I pulled out my phone and blocked Samantha's number. I knew several divorced men who had gotten into trouble simply by replying to texts and phone calls. My next action was to call my boss, Jack Iverson, to let him know what had happened. "Damn, son, that's cold," Old Man Iverson said. "Tell you what, I'll call Alice Hawkins and see if I can get you in to see her first thing in the morning. I'll text you when I finish with her." "Thanks, boss. I appreciate that," I told him as we ended the call. Alice Hawkins is a family law attorney who hates cheaters with a passion. I got a text from Jack about 30 minutes later confirming my 9:30 a.m. appointment with Alice. He also offered me the company's private investigative services at no charge. I accepted and sent a "thank you" text in response. I grabbed my laptop and set it up, connecting to the hotel's Wi-Fi. I first checked our joint account, and it was frozen, but not before Samantha had withdrawn nearly 80% of it. Our joint credit cards had been paid off and canceled, and our joint savings account was also mostly gone. Fortunately, all of the monthly bills had already been paid. I logged into my disability account, which was at a different bank. I was relieved to see that it was still available. I now felt vindicated in not telling Samantha about that account. I next logged into my home surveillance system and saw there were 2 videos already saved to the cloud. I pulled up the first video and saw Samantha and Allison coming into the house. A man in a well-tailored suit accompanied Samantha. Interesting, I thought to myself. Looking at the timestamp, I realized this happened shortly after I left. Well, how did it go? Did he sign the papers? Samantha asked after they were all inside the front room. "No," Allison said. "I told you he probably wouldn't. Legally, he has 30 days to respond. By the way, you didn't tell me he would be armed." "Armed? You mean like, with a gun?" "Yes, Samantha, that's what armed usually means," Allison answered sarcastically. "I was never so scared in my life," she declared. "He used to be a federal agent," Samantha quietly told her. "He was shot in the line of duty. That's why he has that cane. I know he has a concealed carry permit." "Oh, wonderful," Allison said. "You could have said something to me in advance." "Wait," the man interjected. "Are you saying he pulled a gun on you?" "Yes," Allison responded. "He went through every room in the house, almost as if he was expecting someone to be here." "Who did he work for? Do you know?" "No, not exactly," Samantha told her. "Some kind of a task force. He never talked about his work much, though. I know he once told my father that he killed people he didn't throw in jail." "Task force? Interesting. I'll have to look into that," Allison said thoughtfully. "Terrific. That is terrific. A mad former fed with a gun. What do you think he's gonna do when he learns the whole truth?" "Settle down. He's not gonna do anything," Allison said. "Yes, he's angry, and to be honest, he has every right to be. But he's not stupid, and he's not gonna learn the whole truth. One other thing, Samantha." "What?" "Why didn't you tell me this was his home before you two got married?" "I didn't think it would matter," Samantha answered. "Why? Why? Are you kidding me? Technically speaking, you have no right to this place in a divorce. But you said I deserved to have it. And I meant it. But you just made my job a whole lot harder," Allison spat. "So, does that mean we can set him up now?" the man asked. "I've got a whole thumb drive chock full of images and video right here with me. It won't take me but a second to put it on his computer. Then we'll have him dead to rights. He'll be in jail before he knows what hit him." "Put that away, right now," Allison commanded. "We're not at that stage yet. Besides, he took his backup drive when he left, and he locked the door to his office. I think he also changed the security code to that lock." "So," the man asked, "give me a tire iron. I can use that to break through this door. Plus, Sam gave me the password to his computer." "Don't even think of it," Allison said, her face red. "We're going to have to be careful here. Don't do anything rash. You hear me? Just give me some time to think things through. I'll need to find out everything I can about your husband, Samantha. I have federal contacts. Let me see what I can get from them. In the meantime, you two cool your jets. And don't do anything stupid. You hear me, Alan? We don't work in the same department, but I'm still senior to you. Got it?" "I hear ya," the man sheepishly said. At least now I had a first name, and I knew just how far they would go to set me up. But why? Allison left the house, and the video ended when Samantha and Alan walked up the stairs. The next video was taken in the master bedroom. Alan took his jacket and tie off, throwing them on the back of my chair. He followed up with the rest of his clothing as Samantha undressed. When she was nude, he took her in his arms. "Come on, Sam, why don't we get under the covers and enjoy ourselves?" he asked with a wry smile. Samantha looked up at him as she returned his smile. "I guess it wouldn't hurt," she said. "After all, this will be our bedroom before long. You might as well get used to it." She turned and spotted my ring on the dresser. "Oh, look at this. Mikey left his wedding ring. How thoughtful. Maybe I can pawn it with the rest of his crap?" Both of them laughed at that. She tossed the ring back on the dresser before returning to the bed. "So, which side is mine?" Alan asked, and Samantha pointed to the side closest to the door. "That side," she told him. Alan pulled the covers back and got in the bed. Samantha followed, climbing on top of him afterward. "This is so nice, not having to worry about whether or not my weight will bother your leg." Talk about devastating. This was the first time I had heard her complain about my leg. It usually didn't bother me unless she sat on it for too long, but even then, I never let her know. Until now, I thought my injury never bothered her. "That's right. Old Mikey's a cripple," Alan sneered. "Well, I'll have you know I'm in perfect shape. Gimme that body of yours." Samantha giggled as she wriggled herself on top of him. "Put that big meat inside me and drill me silly," she demanded. Alan obliged. "Aren't you still on the pill?" he asked as he bucked inside her. "No, I quit taking those today," Samantha told him. This was new, as I never knew she was on the pill. She knew that I had a low sperm count, which, according to several doctors I had seen over the years, was something I was born with. But again, we had discussed it, and Sam never seemed concerned about it. It just meant the odds of my fathering a child were reduced. "Then get ready to be pregnant," Alan said. Once done, I stopped the video, unable to watch anymore. I felt my dinner start to come back up and headed for the bathroom. After emptying my guts into the toilet, I washed my face and counted to 10 while taking long, deep breaths. I couldn't believe what I had just seen. The only woman I had ever truly loved in my entire life had made a mockery of our wedding vows. And she had done it in the bed we had shared for the last several years. I began to wonder if I ever really knew her. After collecting myself, I went back into the room and looked through the pictures Allison had given me. They all had a date and timestamp in the lower right corner and were also marked with a location, Dallas, Texas. Going back to my laptop, I pulled up my calendar. I was in Seattle on the exact dates the photos were supposedly taken in Dallas, which meant I also had receipts for any expenditures I made. I figured that alone should be enough to prove I wasn't the man in the photos. I looked closer at the man and noticed no clear face shots. Interesting, I thought. Then it hit me. Examining the photos, I realized 2 pictures showed the man's right thigh. There were no scars present in either image. I could easily prove that all of these photos were staged. But why? Unless… Damn her, I thought. Samantha intended to use the prenuptial to screw me in a divorce to cover up for her infidelity. Adultery meant the guilty party left the marriage only with what he or she brought into it with no support. I looked closer at the divorce papers and realized Samantha went far beyond what the prenup stipulated. She not only wanted my house, but also 80% of all the marital assets and 75% of my 401k, along with a crippling amount for maintenance. I knew there was no way she would ever get that much in court, which explained why Allison pushed me to sign the papers sight unseen. I wanted to find out what I could about this Alan character. I thought he worked with Samantha's law firm, so I went to their website. Sure enough, I found him. Alan Williams, a junior partner who joined the firm after leaving New York a few months ago. I decided to have our investigators look into his background. Seeing it was pushing 11:30 p.m. I shut my laptop down and prepared to go to bed, but my phone buzzed. Looking, I saw it was Jacob Green, Samantha's father. I was surprised he would call so late in the evening, but decided to take the call anyway. "Mike, this is Jake Green. How the hell are ya, boy?" he asked in his usual salty manner. "Frankly, I've had better days, Pop," I answered. "I'll bet you have. I was at the club with Langley, and he told me that you and Sam are getting divorced," Jacob said. Imagine my surprise when he asked me how I handled the news of my daughter's pending divorce. I tried Sam's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. "Want to fill me in?" "It's true. She had me served this evening. Claims adultery. Did you do it, boy?" Jacob asked in a severe tone. This was just like him, direct and to the point. It was one of the things I admired about the man.
Él no, Ian Suarat.
"But she did." "What? You telling me she cheated around on you but claims you messed around on her?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you, Pop. You got proof of this? Sure do. You want to see it for yourself? I asked him. As a matter of fact, yes, I do. Where are you? I'm coming over right now. I told him where I was staying, and he repeated it for verification. I'll be there in a half hour. I don't give a shit how late it is. I want to see this so-called evidence. I'll be here, Pop, I told him. We ended the call, and I got everything ready to show him, then made a small pot of coffee, knowing he would want some. I heard a knock on the door, grabbed my pistol, and looked through the peephole. Seeing it was Pop and verifying that he was alone, I cracked the door open. It's just me, son. No one else is here, Pop said. I unlatched the chain and opened the door but kept my pistol handy. Come on in, I told him. He walked in, and his eyes grew wide when he saw the 9mm handgun. What the hell? You expecting trouble? He asked, shocked. Always, I told him as I closed and locked the door. Well, put that damn thing away, will ya? It makes me nervous, Pop said. I made the weapon safe and put it back in the holster, close by my side. Want some coffee before we get started? I offered, holding out a paper cup. Pop shrugged his shoulder and took the cup. What the hell? He said. I poured each a cup, and we sat down. Are you sure this is coffee? He asked after a tentative sip. That's what the package says, I answered, causing him to laugh. Show me what you got, he finally said. I handed him the photos Allison gave me earlier that evening. Pop looked through them, his brows furrowed. He sighed and handed them back to me. What do you think? I asked. Well, the guy in those photos does seem to bear a slight resemblance, but whoever he is, he ain't you. What makes you say that? For starters, I've seen you in swimming trunks. That fella doesn't have a scar on his right thigh, Pop said. In a couple of those photos, he looks like he's putting all his weight on that right knee. I've never seen you do that. I couldn't help but smile at his observation. He was right, however. Since being shot, I have never been able to put all my weight on that knee. One other thing, I added. Look at the date and timestamp on those photos. According to Allison, this happened in Dallas. I was in Seattle when these pictures were allegedly taken, and I have the receipts to prove it. Interesting, the older man said. You said you have proof that Samantha is cheating on you. I want to see it. It's pretty graphic, Pop, I warned, and he waved off my concern. I'm an adult boy. There's nothing I haven't seen before. Trust me on that. Okay, have it your way. This was from earlier this evening. After I left the house, I told him as I started the videos. He watched the action play out on my laptop with his brows furrowed. When they finished, I brought up the real-time surveillance cameras. Samantha and Alan were sleeping in my bed, naked, arms and legs wrapped around each other. I've seen enough, he said. Turn it off, please. I ended the video and closed the lid on my laptop. Well? I asked. I believe you, son, he finally said quietly. He looked deep in thought for a few moments, then looked at me. You think this has anything to do with your time on the task force? The idea had crossed my mind, and I found his question intriguing, so I wanted to hear his reasoning. What makes you ask that? I could see him carefully choosing his words. I haven't exactly been completely straight with you, son. Please understand that, like you, I have been sworn to a level of secrecy. I understand, Pop, I reassured him. I know all about the task force, he told me quietly. I also know about that MMAS bunch. MMAS, the Mutual Marital Assurance Society, was a radical group started by a female lawyer who sought to punish cheating husbands. Unfortunately, her quest for power went way beyond that objective. Could you explain that a bit for me, Pop? I asked quietly. He sighed heavily before continuing. Trudy isn't Samantha's birth mother, but she's the only mother Sammy has ever really known, Pop began. I knew Trudy was Pop's second wife, but never pressed the issue. I always figured if he wanted to talk about it, he would. And now, he was. Sam's birth mother abandoned us when she was a little girl. I'm sorry to hear that, I told him. He shook his head. Don't be. Patricia, that was her name, got involved with the woman who started that MMAS. Wanted me to help underwrite her operation. She figured I'd be open to it, given some of my charitable and political donations. I met the woman, Mona Larson, listened to her spew her snake oil. Of course, I refused to help her. I understood her pain, but there was no way I could condone what she wanted to do. Patty, on the other hand, not only condoned it, but wanted to help Mona so much she abandoned us to do it. I hired Bill Jackson to deal with my divorce. She took her maiden name, Witherspoon, and moved to Washington, D.C. to work with Mona. Wait, did you say Witherspoon? I asked. Yes, I did. Why? Pop asked. I recall hearing about a Pat Witherspoon who died in custody a few months before I got shot. Was that your first wife? Yes, Pop said quietly. She didn't just die, though. She was murdered by Mona Larson. I was told she had some kind of poison capsule in her neck. She supposedly got a message from Mona that her services were no longer required. That triggered a hypnotic suggestion that she slap her neck. When she did, the poison capsule broke and she was dead before her body hit the floor. I didn't know all that, I told him. Wasn't my case. It's neither here nor there, Pop said. By then, I had already remarried. Trudy can't have children, but she happily adopted Sammy. He wiped his eyes, then looked at me before speaking again. I know MMAS has a history of going after former agents. It's their way of getting revenge. That's why I asked if you think they're involved in this. It had crossed my mind, but I was under the impression the corporate entity known as MMAS is destroyed. Technically, it is. But there's still a lot of rogue operatives and agents being rounded up, Pop said. I heard they just took a couple of former contractors into custody not that long ago. Damn, I said. I hadn't heard that, but I haven't exactly been in a position where I needed to know. So tell me, how is it you know all this? After Patty left us, I filed for divorce. Bill Jackson still did family law in those days, and he took my case. When I told him what happened, he informed me that he and some others had heard about Larson and her group, Pop said. He had this crazy idea and ran it by me. I liked it and started putting together a funding mechanism. We formed a board, planned everything out. Hell, I put together the funding to purchase that old army base you call Fort Apache. I also lobbied Congress to get federal support. You know the rest, Pop told me. So, when we first met, you already knew about me, I suggested. I knew everything about you, son. Everything, Pop said. Including your reputation as a hard-nosed who doesn't take shit from anyone. So you were just yanking my chain the day we first met, I joked. Pop smiled and nodded his head. It's what I do best, son, he admitted. Besides, I wanted to see if there were any truth to the rumors. So, what are you gonna do now? I have an appointment to see an attorney tomorrow morning. I intend to have the restraining order lifted. Then I plan to evict Sam from my house. Restraining order? Pop asked, shocked. She took out a restraining order? Yeah. Can you believe it? Then I'm counterfiling based on adultery. And I plan to invoke the prenuptial you had us sign. If I have my way, someone will go to jail. Jail? Pop asked. The last time I looked, attempted extortion, conspiracy, and perjury are still against the law. So is fabricating evidence. Things have changed over the last 7 years, but I don't think they've changed that much. Pop laughed at that. Good luck. Just do me one small favor, if you would, please, Pop said. What's that? I know you have to do what you need to do, but try not to hurt my little girl too much. Please, he begged quietly. I knew what he meant and nodded in understanding. I'll do my level best, I told him. I do have some questions, though, if you don't mind. What's that? What can you tell me about Sam's first husband? I had never asked Samantha about that, figuring it was in the past. Pop sighed heavily and nodded his head. His name is Alvin Morrison. He's an accountant. Last I heard, he worked for a financial services outfit downtown. He and Sam met in college and got married after they graduated. Seemed like a nice enough fella. Bit of a chicken, though, if you ask me, Pop said. What happened? Sam says he cheated on her, Pop answered. Kicked his butt to the curb, filed divorce based on the prenup. I never heard from him after that. Sounds a bit familiar, doesn't it? I asked. Pop's eyes widened, and his brows raised as he looked at me. Now that you mention it, yeah, it does, he finally stated. You think she set him up as well? Don't know until I've had a chance to look into it, but it certainly seems like a possibility, doesn't it? I suppose it does. Which means, at this point, absolutely nothing, I interrupted. I'm just thinking out loud right now, but it is something that needs to be checked out. I agree, Pop said as he stood to leave. Keep me in the loop, if you would. We'll see, Pop, I told him sadly. He seemed to understand, but I could tell he was slightly disappointed in his daughter. We shook hands, and I walked him to the door. He turned to me before leaving. I'm sorry about all this, son, Pop said quietly. This was the first time I had heard him apologize for anything, and I knew it didn't come easy. You're a good man and don't deserve this. I appreciate that, Pop. Apology accepted. One last thing, son. Stay in touch, will ya? Of course, I said. To my surprise, he hugged me like a father would a son, then left. I closed the door, went back to bed, pulled the covers down, and went asleep. The following day, I got up earlier than usual, did my business, dressed, and then gathered my things for the day. I didn't bother checking the surveillance system. I could always look at it when I returned. After grabbing a light breakfast and a fresh caramel mocha, I headed to the office, classic Tull keeping me company. My boss, Jack Iverson, the CEO of Iverson Security Services, or ISS, waved me into his office when I arrived. I saw Terry Torres, the head of investigative services, in his office, so I went to Jack's corner office. "Morning, Mike," Jack said. "I wasn't expecting you in until after your appointment with Alice. I couldn't sleep, so I decided to come on in," I explained. "I understand," Jack told me. "I took the liberty of briefing Terry on your situation. I hope you don't mind." "Not at all. In fact, I have a couple of leads that might be useful." "Oh?" Terry asked. "I learned last night that the man Samantha is cheating on me with his Alan Williams, a partner with the Hempstead Law Group. I couldn't print a picture, but he's on their website. If that doesn't work, you can Google a-hole. Maybe you can get a picture there." Both men laughed at that. "That's a start. Anything else?" Terry asked. "Yeah. I want you to see if you can find an Alvin Morrison. I believe he works for a financial services outfit here in town," I said. "And who is he, exactly?" Terry asked. "He's Samantha's first husband. I want to know everything about their divorce. Should be a public record, so it'll be easy to pull up. I'd appreciate it if you could verify his employment. If he's in town, that should be relatively easy to do," Terry said. "Just out of curiosity, though, what are your intentions?" "I'd like to chat with him about his divorce. I have a feeling this isn't the first time Samantha's played this little game," I said. Terry nodded his head as he made notes. "One other thing. I need to know everything you can learn about these photos." I handed Terry one of the pictures from the envelope Allison gave me the previous day. "Damn, you don't ask for much, do you, boss?" Terry asked sarcastically as he looked at the photo. Jack looked at it after Terry handed it to him. "You weren't even in Dallas when this was taken," Jack observed. "Assuming this date stamp is correct." "No, I wasn't," I replied. "The photo could take some time, but I should have some answers on the rest of this for you by the end of the day," Terry told me. "Don't worry, Mike. I'll get my best people on this and forward whatever we find to you and Alice." "Thanks, Terry. I really appreciate that," I told him. "I owe you." He smiled at that. "Buy me a cold one, and we'll call it even," he quipped. "Well, I'd better get to it. I'll be in touch." "Thanks, Terry," Jack said as Terry left. I echoed the sentiment, and Jack motioned for me to close the door. He looked at me, concerned, before speaking. "You think this might be a rogue MMAS operation, Mike? You know how those folks are about getting revenge," he said. "I don't know, Jack. I thought that at first, but I'm not sure. I did learn one interesting little tidbit, though." "What's that?" Jack asked. "Samantha's birth mother was Pat Witherspoon, one of Ma's top field operatives." "That is interesting. She's been dead for quite a while now, from what I've heard. Tell you what I'll do. I'll reach out to Bill Jackson and Oscar Warren and see if they've heard any chatter. Oscar's pretty much the top dog over there at Fort Apache now," Jack said. "That's what I heard as well. Tell you what, Mike, you got a good group of people backing you up on this. Let them do the heavy lifting. Meanwhile, take some time off, maybe go fishing or something," Jack said, concerned. "I appreciate that, Jack, but I can't just sit on my butt while Samantha screws me over," I told him. "I understand how you feel, Mike. Really, I do. But maybe you should sit this one out. You're not a field agent anymore," Jack told me. "I know, but I can't just sit back and do nothing. I'm just not wired that way." "No, you're not, and that's one of the things I admire about you. But you're not much good to me in the shape you're in now, Mike," Jack said. "We've got your back. Take some time off anyway. You've earned it. When we learn something, you'll be the first to know." I took in Jack's face and realized he was this close to ordering me to take time off. The professional side of me realized he was right. I needed to back off a bit and decompress. And he was right that I had a good group of people behind me. After thinking about it, I nodded my head in agreement. "You're right, Jack," I finally said. "I just need to get a few things from my desk before I see Alice." "Smart move, Mike," Jack said with a wry smile. "Go on, do what you gotta do. We'll be in touch. And keep me in the loop." "I will," I told him. "Thanks." I went to my office and pulled up my expense report with copies of receipts for the days I was in Seattle. Then I copied the 2 videos I downloaded to a thumb drive, adjusted my out-of-office email auto-response message, then packed up my stuff. On the way out, I saw Jack smile and nod his head. I smiled back and left. I got to the building where Alice Hawkins worked, parked, and went inside. I was about 15 minutes early, but I knew Alice wouldn't mind. I checked in with the receptionist, who directed me to the waiting area. A few minutes later, she escorted me to Alice's office. "Good morning, Mr. Jacobs," Alice said as she offered a hand. "Mr. Iverson told me to expect you this morning. Would you care for a cup of coffee? The shop on the first floor makes a wonderful caramel mocha." "That would be terrific, Miss Hawkins," I said. "Please." I started to pull some money out of my pocket, but Alice stopped me. "My treat. Sally, would you mind running down for me, please? 2 large caramel mochas, and get yourself something as well," Alice said as she pulled some money from her purse. "Of course, Miss Hawkins. Thank you," the pretty, young receptionist said as she took Alice's money. After Sally left, Alice motioned to a chair in front of her desk, and I sat down. "Mr. Iverson tells me you've been served with divorce papers," Alice said. "That's correct, Miss Hawkins," I replied. "Please call me Alice. Do you have the papers with you?" "Yes, I do," I told her, opening my briefcase. I grabbed the envelope and handed it to her. Alice looked through the papers, frowning as she did so. When she finished, she set the papers down and looked at me with a scowl. "There are some fairly serious charges being made here," Alice finally said through gritted teeth. "Is there any evidence of infidelity? Because if there is, you should know that I do not represent cheaters. There is evidence, but none that will implicate me. If you're interested, I'll show you. If not, I'll find someone more objective to handle my case," I told her sternly. She seemed to shrink a bit at that. "By all means, Mr. Jacobs, show me." I handed her the envelope of photos and watched her eyes widen as she scanned through them. She shook her head and looked at me when she finished. "Can you dispute this?" "Absolutely," I told her, standing up with the help of my cane. Alice looked shocked as I unfastened my belt and dropped my trousers. "Mr. Jacobs, please." "That isn't necessary," she said. "I'll be the judge of what's necessary," I growled. Then her eyes fell on my right thigh, now exposed. "Oh my," she sighed in shock. "I damn near lost this leg in the service of my country. Spent months in the hospital going through surgery and physical therapy, learning to walk all over again." I hissed. "I still can't put my weight on that knee like the man in those photos did. Do you believe me now, Miss Hawkins? Or do I take my business down the street? You're alleging these photos were fabricated?" Alice asked. "I'm not alleging anything, Miss Hawkins. I'm telling you flat out, those photos are fabricated. On top of that, I have expense reports and receipts proving I was in Seattle, Washington when those photos were taken. I'm good, but not even I can be in 2 places at once. Now, tell me, will you represent me, or do I go somewhere else?" "I'll take your case, Mr. Jacobs," Alice finally said, handing the photos back. "Now, please, pull your pants back up." I pulled my trousers back up and fastened my belt when Sally returned with our coffee. She looked at me, confused. "Is everything all right?" she asked. "Just proving a point. Everything is fine," I told her before taking my seat. Sally looked at Alice for confirmation. "Everything is fine, Sally." "Thank you," she said as Sally handed over the change from the coffee purchases. Sally smiled, then left the office. Alice looked at me before taking a sip of coffee. "I'm sorry for doubting you, Mr. Jacobs. I hope we won't have to go through that again. Please call me Mike. And I accept your apology. I hope I won't have to drop true in the courtroom, but I will if I have to prove the point," I told her. Alice smiled at that. "I see your reputation precedes you, Mike. And no, I doubt you'll have to do that. But in all fairness, it's nice to know you're willing to go the extra mile if necessary. What else do you have for me?" I pulled out my phone and showed Alice the video I took of my confrontation with Allison. She frowned as she watched the video, then handed the phone back. "So, your wife has retained Allison Cartwright," Alice said. "She has quite the reputation as well. Ethics doesn't seem to be an obstacle for her, according to this video. I'd like a copy of that, please. It'll come in handy when I file my complaint against her." "Complaint?" "Yes. That video shows several ethics violations and at least one possible criminal act. Plus, she accompanied you to your house without a police escort, and that's highly unusual. What else do you have?" I handed her the thumb drive with the 2 videos I took from my surveillance system. Alice looked at both of those, a smile forming on her face. "Well?" I asked. "More fuel for my complaint," Alice said. "What's this about pulling a gun on Miss Cartwright? Did you really pull a gun on an officer of the court?" "Yes, I did." "Why?" Alice asked. She nodded her head as I explained my experiences in the task force. "And you thought that maybe your wife and or Ms. Cartwright had something, or someone waiting to ambush and drug or assault you?" "Something like that, yeah," I said. "In fact, I was shot in a very similar situation." "I see," Alice said. "Fortunately for you, Mike. I'm familiar with the task force, and I'm familiar with some of the tactics used by MMAS. I've represented quite a few of the men your task force has helped. I'm sure Ms. Cartwright will try to make an issue of it. Don't worry, I've got it under control. Thank you, I said. So let me see if I have this right. You own the house you shared with Samantha, correct? Yes. It was passed down to me from my grandparents long before I ever met Samantha, I explained. What about your bank accounts? Samantha removed 80% of our accounts, and Allison had them frozen. Alice looked at me, shocked. She froze the accounts after your wife took 80%? Correct, I said. There was no real reason for that other than just plain vindictiveness and an attempt to slow you down, keep you from retaining legal services, Alice said. Why are they doing all of this to you? Now that's the $64,000 question, isn't it, counselor? I asked sarcastically. Hopefully, your company's investigators can come up with some answers, Alice said. Yes, Mr. Iverson informed me that Mr. Torres will be working the case. I look forward to what he finds out. As do I told her. First things first, I need to get that restraining order lifted and get you back into your house. Then I need to get your assets returned. In the meantime, I'll answer this petition with one of our own. Do you have a copy of your prenuptial agreement? Yes, I do, I told her, pulling it out of my briefcase. Alice looked it over, set it aside, and handed me a checklist. It will probably take me a couple days to get this ironed out. Do what you can on that checklist. Are you set for funds until we get the money back into your account? Yes, I'll be okay, I told her. All right, Mike. I've got it from here. I shouldn't have to remind you not to do anything stupid in the meantime, but I'm going to anyway. I don't want to have to bail you out of jail. No problem, Alice, I told her with a chuckle. I've got it under control. No, you don't, she remarked. At least not yet. Your cheating swine of a wife has just served you with divorce papers, falsely accused you of adultery based on fabricated evidence, kicked you out of your house, stolen a good chunk of money, and wants to steal most of your assets as well. And that's just for starters. But we will get things under control. We exchanged contact information, then ended the meeting. On the way out, I stopped at Sally's desk and paid a healthy retainer. Then I left, feeling like I had some control over things. I stopped for lunch and received a call between bites of my cheeseburger. I saw it was from Jack, so I took the call. How did things go with Alice? He asked. Went well, I answered. I hope to see something happen real soon. Good, Jack responded. I spoke with Bill and Oscar. They're not aware of anything at the moment, but Oscar said he'll be by to see you later this afternoon or this evening. I suspect he'll want some background. I told him where you're hanging out. No problem. I'm sure he does, I said. Anything else? Terry has some info for you. He's sending you an email with his summary so far. Don't want to say too much over the phone, but I will tell you this. Turns out Ms. Cartwright handled Samantha's first divorce as well. Interesting, I said. I thought you might say that, Jack said. Anyway, I can't hear the television in the background. You at that new sports bar and grill? Yeah, chowing down on a mega cheeseburger, I told him. Not bad, actually. Maybe I'll try it one of these days, Jack said. You take care of yourself, and I don't want to see you in here tomorrow. Got it? Got it, boss, I responded. Good. By the way, good job on that monthly report. Looks like things are improving out west. Thanks, I noticed that as well. All right, I'll let you go. Talk to you soon, Mike. We ended the call, and I turned back to my burger. I was nearly finished when my phone buzzed. I saw a text from Terry, Alvin Morrison, financial planner, Tri-States Financial Services, followed by an address close by and a phone number. I acknowledged the text and received an almost immediate reply. More to come. Stand by. We'll email. Thanks, I wrote back. That was fast. We're the best, boss, he replied. I gave his message a thumbs up emoji and called Alvin's number. To my amazement, he answered after the first ring. Thank you for calling Tri-States Financial Services, the best in the business. I am Alvin Morrison. How can I help secure your financial future today? I was momentarily taken aback. At first, I thought this was a recording, but then I realized it was an actual person. Yes, my name is Mike Jacobs. I'd like to speak with you as soon as possible, I answered. Absolutely, Mr. Jacobs. I'd love to meet you, Alvin said. I just so happened to have an opening at 1 p.m. Would that work for you? I looked at my watch before answering. That would give me roughly an hour, assuming I could finish my burger in the next 10 to 15 minutes. Yes, that would be perfect. I'll see you at 1 p.m. Thanks, I said. I look forward to seeing you, Mr. Jacobs, Alvin cheerfully said before we ended the call. I did a quick Google search to see how much guys like Alvin made in an hour and made a mental note of it. I had no intention of purchasing any of his services at the moment. Still, I decided I would compensate him for his time and whatever information he could provide. Wrapping up my lunch, I headed out. As I drove out of the parking lot, I heard a line from an old Toll song on my car stereo. The witch's promise was coming. Believing he listened while laughing, "You flew? You got that shit right, Ian," I said to no one in particular. I finally got to the building where Alvin worked, parked the car, and went inside. I introduced myself to the receptionist, who escorted me to Alvin's office. I saw a reasonably tall, lanky man a few years younger than me in a business suit, white shirt, and tie. He smiled as he stood and shook my hand. "Good afternoon, Mr. Jacobs," he said in greeting. "Would you care for a cup of coffee?" "Of course," I said, sitting down. The receptionist asked how I liked my coffee, then left and returned a few moments later with a steaming mug of coffee. I thanked her and took a sip, finding the hot brew sufficiently flavored. "So, Mr. Jacobs, what can I do for you today? Are you looking to invest or possibly set up a retirement portfolio? We offer some of the best packages in the business, and I can assure you a good return on your investments," Alvin cheerfully stated, smiling the whole time. I wondered if the smile had been surgically implanted on his face. "Please, call me Mike," I said, hoping to put him at ease before launching into the real reason for my visit. "Okay, Mike, and feel free to call me Alvin," he said with his constant smile. "Thank you, Alvin," I responded, almost feeling wrong about what I would do next. "I'm sorry to say, I'm not here to purchase any of your products. I'm here to ask about your divorce from Samantha Green." Alvin's smile disappeared, and his face went dark. "I'm sorry, Mr. Jacobs, but that's not open for discussion. I'm afraid I'll have to ask that you leave now," Alvin growled. I pulled the small stack of $100 bills from my pocket and counted off 3 bills as his eyes grew wide. "I understand this is a sore subject for you, Alvin. I intend to compensate you for your time and whatever information you can provide. I believe financial planners in this area make about $40 an hour. I'm willing to pay you $300 for the same amount of time," I responded, holding 3 $100 bills in my hand. I saw him look at the money as he considered my offer. Then his demeanor softened. "That's very generous of you, Mike," he finally said. "Just one question before I decide whether or not to accept your offer." "Anything," I told him. "Are you a private investigator or a law enforcement officer?" "I'm not. I used to be a federal agent, but that was a long time ago. Before this," I said, pointing to my leg. He looked where I pointed and at the cane. Then he nodded his head. "All right," he said. "I accept your offer." I handed him the bills. "Thank you." "You're welcome. Would you mind if I record this conversation? I want to make sure I get everything right." "That's fine," he said, shrugging his shoulders. I pulled out my phone and started the audio recorder app. "Interview with Alvin Morrison," I said into the recorder, adding the date and the time. "So, Alvin, what can you tell me?" "Not much to tell, really," he began. "I met Samantha in college. We shared a few classes and I was attracted to her. We dated, fell in love. You know, all the usual stuff. We married right out of college. She took me to see her father." "Jacob Green?" I asked. "Yeah, him. He hated me from the very beginning. I know he's rich and all, but I never imagined he would be so brash. Profane. Actually, I chuckled at that. Anyway, things went well for about 5 years. We were talking about having children and buying a house. Basically, all the stuff young married couples talk about. I came home from work one day and saw her at the kitchen table with another woman. At first, I thought she was a friend of Samantha's from that law firm she worked for. "Would that be Hempstead?" I asked. Alvin nodded. "Yes, that would be the one." Anyway, I walked into the kitchen and said hello. The other woman handed me an envelope and said I was served. I looked and saw Samantha was accusing me of infidelity. "Did you ever cheat on her?" "Never. I loved Samantha with all my heart. I know I'm not the most attractive guy, nor the strongest, but I loved her, and I would never do anything to hurt her." "All right. Did they have proof of this alleged infidelity?" I asked. The other woman, I learned, was Samantha's attorney, handed me a smaller envelope full of photographs. Claimed she had even more, along with a video. Threatened to send them out to my friends, family, and even the people I work with, unless I signed the papers right then and there. Of course, I refused to sign them until I had a chance to see an attorney. Samantha also had a restraining order and said I had to leave right then. She even had a lot of my stuff already packed. Her lawyer told me she had other evidence against me and threatened to use it if I didn't sign. I left and tried to check into a motel but found none of my cards worked. That's when I learned that Samantha cleaned out our accounts. We had over $100,000 saved up, but it was all gone. I ended up staying with my parents. They loaned me enough to see a lawyer, but he was basically worthless. I went back to the condo to get more of my things and hopefully talk some sense into Samantha. I forgot about the restraining order. Anyway, she was in bed with some pig when I got there. I lost it and went after him, but he was a whole lot bigger than me. He kicked my butt and beat me so bad that I had to be taken to the hospital in an ambulance. When I woke up, I found myself handcuffed to the bed. That's when I was told I was under arrest for violating a restraining order and possessing illegal spicy videos. After I was discharged from the hospital, I was taken to jail. The detective working the case discovered the images on my phone were placed there after I was knocked unconscious. So, the charges were dropped, but the damage was already done. I was fired from my job. Basically, my whole life went down the toilet. What about the charge of violating the restraining order? Turns out that was fabricated as well. There was no restraining order, and the paper Samantha's lawyer gave me hadn't been filed with the court. But that didn't matter. I still ended up spending a weekend in jail, Alvin spit. What then? They proceeded to destroy me every way they could, Alvin hissed. By the time it was over, I had nothing. I was broke, out of a job, but still expected to pay maintenance and the mortgage on the condo. I took whatever job I could get just to keep my head above water. I finally got on here, and I'm just now beginning to see light at the end of the tunnel. Do you still have the pictures they gave you of your alleged adultery? I asked. Yes, as a matter of fact, I do, Alvin said, opening his briefcase. He pulled out a small, tattered envelope and handed it to me. You keep them in your briefcase? I asked, surprised. I still live with my parents, and I'd be mortified if they ever saw them. I keep meaning to throw them away, but I just haven't gotten around to it yet. I nodded in understanding, then looked through the pictures, and what I saw shocked me. The background and the poses depicted were exactly like the photos Allison handed me. Even the woman in the pictures looked to be the same person. There were only two things different in this set of images. First, the date and time stamps were different, and second, the man in this set of photographs looked shorter and somewhat thinner. Other than that, they appeared identical. Would you mind if I keep these for a while? I know someone who can analyze these photographs. You can keep them, for all I care, Alvin said. Thank you, I said. Tell me, have you considered taking legal action against your ex-wife and her attorney? I spoke to a couple lawyers, but they said there was nothing they could do. Apparently, I didn't make enough money for their tastes. I see. How are you holding up now? I was a basket case for years. I haven't even dated a woman since this happened. As you can imagine, I have a lot of issues with trust, and I'm still trying to dig my way out of debt. At least you don't have alimony or the mortgage on your condo to deal with anymore, I told him, hoping to give him a slight ray of hope. My statement was met with an expression of shock mixed with confusion. What are you talking about? He asked. I've been paying that woman nearly $3,000 a month to cover alimony and the mortgage on the condo I used to live in for almost 8 years. I still have just over 2 years of alimony and another 18 years on the mortgage. Weren't you informed that Samantha remarried about 6 years ago and that she sold that condo about the same time? I asked. No, Alvin declared, shaking his head. No one said anything. Samantha's attorney had it taken right out of my pay and deposited in an account for Samantha. I quickly did the math and figured Samantha owed this poor guy just over $210,000. There was another issue, and I realized Terry would need to look into Samantha's financial records. There was an account in her name with a ton of money somewhere. Perhaps she was splitting the money she extorted from Alvin with Allison. Can you contact your HR department and have them get you the information on where that money is being sent? I asked. I'll ask, Alvin said. What if they refuse to give it to me? Then I'll ask my lawyer to file a subpoena for that information. Something about this is very fishy. I'm no lawyer, Alvin, but it sounds to me like you have a serious case against your ex-wife and her attorney. How do you know this? Alvin asked. Because Samantha pulled something very similar to me just yesterday, I said. Would you be willing to testify to this in court? Absolutely, Alvin snarled. You think she could go to jail for this? I think that's a definite possibility, I answered. Then hell yes, I'll testify, Alvin said. I'll have my lawyer get in touch with you, Alvin, if you're okay with that. I'm more than okay with that, Alvin responded. I nodded my head and stood with the help of my cane. Alvin stood with me and offered his hand, which I accepted. We'll be in touch, I told him. I left and headed for my hotel room. When I got there, I pulled out the photos Alvin gave me and compared them to the images I had. Sure enough, They were nearly identical. I grabbed my phone and called Terry. "Torres," he said when he answered. "Terry, are you anywhere near my hotel?" I asked. "I can be there in about an hour," he said. "What's up?" "I got a little challenge for you." "You know me. I'm always up to a challenge," Terry responded. I could hear the smile in his voice. "Good. I need you to come by my room at the hotel. I have something for you to check out." "On my way," Terry said. We ended the call, and I checked my home surveillance system. So far, nothing new had been saved since Samantha and Alan left this morning. I pulled my phone and made a call to Alice. "Yes, Mr. Jacobs?" she asked when she picked up the phone. I told her about my meeting with Alvin and heard her gasp in surprise. "I've checked and I can assure you the restraining order against you is very real. But I definitely want to speak with Mr. Morrison." We ended the call after I gave her Alvin's contact information. By then, Terry was knocking on my door. "What's up, boss?" he asked when I let him inside. I showed him the pictures Alvin gave me, and he appeared shocked as he looked at them. "Can you explain this?" I asked. "I've heard about this, but I've never actually seen anyone get away with it," Terry said as he compared the two photos. "Heard about what?" I asked. "Deepfake photos," Terry said. "Basically, someone with the right skills could create fake photos and videos, and they would be very difficult to disprove. In this case, it seems whoever did this is using the same background and the same two human forms to create fake images of spouses having sex. Pretty lazy if you ask me. You think we can prove these are fakes to a judge?" I asked. "Yeah, I know some photo experts who could probably take these apart, but it would be easier if we had the originals, which I suspect are digital." "All right, take a couple from each batch and see what you can find out for me," I told him. "Anything else?" "Yeah, I looked into Williams for you. He joined Hempstead not too long ago and came here from New York. Get this, he's married with 2 kids. Terry showed me a family portrait. There he was, Alan, a pretty blonde woman, and 2 good-looking young children, probably not more than 7 years old. For a lawyer, he's awful stupid. Cheating on a beautiful family like this," I said. "Tell me about it." "Her name is Rhonda. She's a state representative, heir to a fairly wealthy man. Which means she's still in New York, and I'll bet you $1 to a donut hole there's a prenup involved," I said. "Yup, on both counts," Terry said. I couldn't help but smile. "Oh yeah, Alan Williams would pay dearly. What else?" I asked Terry. "I looked into Morrison's divorce like you asked. Pretty straightforward, according to the paperwork. Samantha filed for divorce based on adultery. The terms and conditions of the prenuptial were enforced, and she got a healthy order for 10 years of spousal support, unless she remarried, and Alvin was ordered to pay the mortgage on their condo," Terry said. "The order does stipulate that if the condo is sold, the proceeds are to be split equally between the 2 parties," he added. "So he's been paying Samantha for a mortgage that no longer exists and paying support to someone who doesn't deserve it. Any idea where the money is going?" I asked. "Cartwright set up a separate account and had the funds automatically taken out of Morrison's paychecks," Terry said. "I wasn't able to find any information on that account. Personally, I don't know how Morrison managed to survive all this time on what was left. At least they didn't have children. If I can get you the account information, can you look into it, find out how much she's got in it?" "Of course, but to be honest, it may very well take a court order or a subpoena to get any details," Terry explained. "Do what you have to do. Get with Alice if you need something legal. I assume you've already provided all this to her." "I have," Terry acknowledged. "And I'm sure you have people tailing Samantha?" "Of course. You know they have people watching you as well?" "I figured that," I admitted. "Frankly, I don't give a shit. Let them waste their time and money following me." Terry chuckled at that. "Well, I'd better get back to it. I'll send you an email with what I have so far," he said. "Sounds like a plan. I look forward to your report," I told him as I shook his hand. "And good work, Terry." He smiled at the compliment. "Thanks, boss. That means a lot," he said. I noticed the extra spring in his step as he left the room and smiled. Terry was a good man, and I meant what I said. I sat down at my laptop and logged into the home surveillance system, but there wasn't anything new. So I sat back on the bed, watched television, and considered my next actions.